I really appreciate the opportunity to just share a little bit more about where we are in this process this semester. With the conversation we kicked off at the Fall Faculty Workshop, we held an open forum previously, and so it's great to continue the conversation with you guys here today. I think I've met everyone in the room, but if not, my name is Lauren Cosrow. I'm the chair of the assessment committee. My full-time job here is a librarian, but we're going to be talking today, obviously, about assessment. And also Pamela Perry is here as well. Do you want to introduce yourself really quickly here?
Sure. I'm Pamela Perry. I'm Director of Planning and Accreditation, and my full-time job is Director of Planning and Accreditation, and I'm supporting Lauren in this process.
And then I have several members of the assessment committee who are here today, so thank you all for coming. And as we open up kind of the second half of our time here today, we appreciate all of you jumping in that dialogue. We're still rolling in, but we're going to get started. So just to share you a little bit of an update of where we are in this process. We are, like we shared at the Fall Faculty Workshop, and as we've shared since then, we are moving at a really, really quick pace. So we want to make sure that we're updating everyone as much as possible on where we're at, the work that's been accomplished, and where we are moving forward. Christopher, would you like my chair?
No, I'm good.
Are you sure? So the information that we've shared to this point. So we've shared the project plan, the professional development schedule for fall 2018, and the stipend information. So we did that at our the open forum that we held for the campus community, and Pamela has paper copies that were from that meeting. VP Baker also sent it out to all full-time and adjunct faculty. So if you need a paper copy, please feel free to grab one of those. It's all that documentation that we've shared to date. And then also, if you want a digital copy, we can make sure that you get your hands on that as well. I did want to make a note that there is already one schedule change to the calendar. We're going to be pushing that information out as much as possible. That was due to our external speaker's calendar. So we had to accommodate him coming to campus. So we did have to make one date, but we're going to be pushing out that information to the campus community. We had our call for our stipend participants. That's in that stage 1 for the program assessment plan developers. So we put that call out, and the deadline for the program assessment plan developer, that was on Friday for individuals who are interested in that stipend, and also the stipend position as the faculty assessment specialist. That was that one position who's going to be kind of serving in a co-chair capacity with me leading this effort. So the deadline for those two stipends to submit names to chairs and coordinators and to the deans was this past Friday. So this week, deans are working with their chairs and coordinators to kind of identify those individuals, see the best fits for their department needs, and then those individuals will be identified by Friday from the VP's office. And so that role, again, just to kind of reiterate if you've seen that documentation for the program assessment plan developer, is really going to be focusing this semester on developing program outcomes. And if they are already in place, really revising and ensuring that their program outcomes, we are all meeting the same standard of quality that we need to meet HLC's outcomes. So whether that's developing program outcomes or whether that's revising and editing those outcomes, that's really going to be the focus of the work this semester. Along with the other kind of big piece of this is our assessment maps. So ensuring that program outcomes, once they're created or revised, are mapping to all of the course outcomes, and then those will also be linked up to our gen ed outcomes. So creating those assessment maps, making sure that outcomes at the course, program, and general education outcome level are all mapped in a succinct structure. And then there's going to be professional development training provided for all pieces of this. So that professional development calendar, again, was shared in that packet. And there are going to be 2 internal trainings prior to our external consultant coming onto campus. That's really going to be providing support around all of these processes, sharing additional information, and getting everyone kind of on the same page of where we're headed, getting some of that initial work done. So when our external consultant comes to campus during that first workshop day, we are already kind of hit the ground running and get that work done that needs to be done. These trainings are designed to get a lot of the work done in kind of this hands-on capacity. So we've heard from faculty really needing support around that, wanting that hands-on work, not just like workshop kind of presentations, but getting that hands-on help from an external consultant. And so we've designed the workshops to do that. So we've scheduled 2 of those workshops. Both will have the support of an external consultant. And so that professional development training will be part of that stipend structure, ensuring that we're all on the same page and have the same level of professional development around this work. So another update, the curriculum forms, a huge thank you to Julie Ann and the curriculum committee. They did some great work in adapting some of the curriculum forms. So the forms were updated to include program outcomes. That's the curriculum proposal form. And then the course forms as well. So these were updated to reflect this kind of shared language, this shared vocabulary, ensuring that we're all using the same terminology across campus. So curriculum forms are reflecting the language that the assessment committee and the campus community will be using. So changing those to outcomes, and then also providing a space where these outcomes that the program plan developers are going to be developing, that there's a place to document this. So the program or the curriculum forms, that will be the place where this work is actually documented. So in these workshops, they're going to be creating or revising these outcomes, and then kind of the official documentation of those will be when those forms are passed through the curriculum committee. That will be the official documentation of every program on campus, every academic program having outcomes assigned to that program or developed for that program. So program developers will be completing the forms, will be submitting to the assessment committee. We're kind of modeling off of this really effective model that the curriculum committee already has in place, where they have the technical review committee, kind of the evaluation and providing feedback, and then before it goes to the full curriculum committee. So we're kind of modeling that in this process as well, where the assessment committee will be reviewing to kind of ensure the quality, making sure they're measurable outcomes, again, whether they're being created this semester or they're being revised as a result of professional development. Assessment committee will be reviewing, kind of really acting as kind of the TRC in this case, and then the curriculum committee will be approving the final forms. Any questions on this piece? So that's all the work that has been done to date. And so really the focus of this open forum was to address a question that came up almost immediately when we received our feedback from HLC, the HLC report. And that's when they identified that we had some work to do for our program learning outcomes. The first question that came up is, well, what do you mean by program, right? And so this was a conversation that we wanted to open up and again, make sure that we have a shared dialogue and a shared language when we use the word program. What are we talking about? What are we talking about in terms of our HLC focus visit that's coming up, right? So what do we mean by program? So the first distinction that we came up with, or that we wanted to kind of share and talk about, dialogue about, is we first have ICCB programs of study. So very, very clearly that these are curricular paths that are approved by ICCB. Now, we also have the term academic programs, which encompasses the credit-bearing curricular paths as outlined in our catalog. So this is really important. This includes the areas of concentration for the AA and AS degrees, AAS programs, and certificates. So ICCB programs of study are the paths that are approved by ICCB, but when on campus, when we're talking about academic programs, that encompasses everything that's a curricular path as outlined in our catalog, okay? So I want to pause here for a second because this is where there was a lot of dialogue and a lot of conversation around this. Are there any questions or initial thoughts when we talk about ICCB programs of study, or then with this kind of phrase or this term, academic programs.
What's the difference between the two, Lauren?
That's a great question. So the ICCB programs of study are curricular paths that are approved through ICCB, okay? Now, for example, in the AA degree, there are areas of concentration. For example, you can get an AA in, what's one of the?
Anthropology.
Anthropology. That is not approved by ICCB. So students will be granted an AA, but the area of concentration in anthropology is not recognized by ICCB, is not approved by ICCB.
But it's recognized by us.
Correct. As an area of concentration, and it is published in our catalog as an area of
Can I
concentration.
assume then that the academic programs are going to be in a greater number than what ICCB has for us?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
So
the
that was the
academic programs that
distinction.
we're going to assess.
So what HLC has said is that programs need program outcomes. So if you are saying there is a curricular path that students at the end of it should have a set, a specific outcomes for that program. For example, if you're taking an area of concentration in anthropology and a different area of concentration in biology, yeah,
Biological science.
biological sciences, two students, one who's going through anthropology, going through biological sciences, right, they will, at the end, the purpose of having those two different curricular paths will have different outcomes that they should have learned. And so ICCB does not make that distinction, we do. And so we need to have program outcomes for those two different curricular paths. So that has been an area of confusion, something that we need to clarify. And so when we're talking about academic programs that need outcomes, that's everything, right? It needs outcomes, yes.
I just want to highlight
Please.
the academic programs that we include AFA music and AFA arts. Depending on the decision of the department, they may decide to keep it or they may decide to remove it.
Sure.
But if we end up keeping them, they ought to be assessed as well.
Under there as well, yes. So really, when we're talking about academic programs, everything needs to be assessed if we're calling it a program, yes.
What is the relationship between program outcomes and the general learning outcomes of the college?
So they should be directly aligned, right? So it's kind of the structure is the course outcomes, right, that our students should be able to learn or our students should be able to do as a result of completing that course. A program is the next level up. So as a result of that course of study, at the end of it, students should be able to know or do, right, these things. And then general education, everything feeds up to our general education outcomes. So those all should be aligned, and that comes back to the curriculum or the assessment maps that I was speaking about earlier. We need to ensure that all of those things are mapped, right? The course, program to gen ed outcomes. Yeah.
So when you talk about assessment, are we going to assess the ICCB programs or the academic programs?
So ICC, well, is it the next slide?
Yeah, it is.
There you go. So,
But
I'm sorry. There we go.
The diagram.
So, HLC requires all academic programs to have program learning outcomes that are systematically assessed. So the answer to your question is yes. We can make the distinction when we're talking about ICC programs of study in terms of the ones that are approved by ICCB, but for assessment purposes, when we're talking about academic assessment, all of these programs need to be assessed.
So,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't understand. So
Sure.
we are going to assess the SAC current.
Everything.
Everything.
Inclusive of the ICCB programs.
But we're not going to have a
Study.
separate assessment for the ICCB, right?
No, if I'm understanding you correctly, right, it's all inclusive, all the programs need to be assessed. If I'm understanding your question correctly. Yeah,
Yeah, just for clarification, when you talk about the ICCD programs, are you referring to like the career type programs versus disciplines in arts and sciences?
so the areas of concentration is really where where it was getting confusing, right? So that's really what we're speaking to. ICC programs of study are, yes, any of those degrees or certificates that are recognized and have been approved through ICCB. Where we were getting sticky is the areas of concentration within the AAF degrees. And so areas of concentration for our purposes for assessment count as programs, and at the end of that, students should be able to do or know a unique set of outcomes. And so that needs to be assessed. If we're saying that there's a separate set of outcomes, then we also need to assess that students are able to do or know those outcomes. Yeah? Yes, you did.
Are the general education outcomes already developed, and if so, where can we find those?
So the 9 current general education outcomes will be going through a review. There's going to be a partnership between the curriculum committee, Julian's committee, and the assessment committee. We are kicking that off. The assessment committee is meeting on Thursday. We are going to kick off that process, and we are going to be working on a proposal to revise our current 9 gen ed outcomes. On our current website, I don't know if I can, are they there?
That or is it under strategic plan? Where, I know there's somewhere.
I don't know, I haven't done it, to be honest,
I don't
because I was
remember where I
gone
found
this
them, but I
summer.
did find them.
I haven't explored on our current website.
Yeah, I found them.
There's no assessment page anymore, that's why.
So they're on
So
all the
just
course outlines
currently.
too,
Oh.
and they're on the TK.
Under academic.
They're on TK20, I mean, I have a PDF document that I downloaded from the last website, it's on the assessment, yeah, so we
Would
can
they
get
be-
them to you, I just don't know currently on the website where they
Under
are.
academic senate, the subcommittees of academic senate.
So they took off the websites, like they took off, like there's no page under that anymore, it just lists the membership and any documentation. That's my own, just from not being here and not catching up of where exactly where they are documented. But there are 9 currently, I have, internal, if I can always shoot you an email with PDF. There's 9 currently, in various locations across the university, or the colleges, infrastructure, yes. And,
You should
they
use
will
those, though.
be-
Right, if you're gonna revise them, then no one really should be searching those out.
well, they need to know where we are in order to revise them, right? So what we currently have.
Right,
Yeah.
but if you can't really match anything up now, because then all of a sudden you guys decide you're gonna redo it
Yes,
all,
right,
now you're gonna
right.
be doing twice the work.
Which is
Why
why, exactly,
So
which is
don't
why,
Get
yes.
too crazy to find them, because they're gonna revise them and then you're gonna do it
And
again.
They have to do it again.
widely
Yeah.
shared, yes,
Okay.
hopefully
Yeah.
widely
Doing
shared.
everything at once.
So that proposal, we have, if you have the packet that has, or you've seen the dates for the open forums, we've scheduled 3 open forums where we're gonna be speaking about and having a dialogue on the general education outcomes this semester. So be on the lookout for those future open forums. We have the dates already, we have the ones that are specifically about general education outcomes, so please come be a part of that conversation. It impacts all of our work, what our general education outcomes are. Yes?
So, let's say I was an overachiever for one semester and I mapped all my course outlines for every course in my program to the gen ed outcomes. If you revise those, do I get to do that all over again?
So do you map them to your program and to your?
Not to my program, but just
Okay,
my
courses.
course outcomes.
So that's the infrastructure that we're really looking for, is the courses to the programs to the gen ed outcomes.
But if you change the gen ed outcomes,
Then, yes, then the mapping is impacted, yes. Yeah,
So don't
it
go
is.
that far.
Yep,
it's
Basically,
not
you're
the answer I
rewriting it.
wanted.
yeah.
Although it may not be as difficult as you
No,
think
I
it
don't-
is,
I mean,
because
how
I
much different
suspect
than
that
the
would be
education?
eliminating some, so you just erase them.
Yeah, and then find another place to map them to.
And, right, so if we're doing the revision and we're narrowing down some of our gen ed outcomes, there will be some revision, but I would say, yeah, that should not be an incredibly arduous process. Yes,
Yeah, but if
Christopher.
they're revising them, they're gonna be revised in TK.
And just to alleviate any anxiety that that statement just created, I believe a lot of that work would be done by the stipend position.
Yes.
So I know
Which is
you
all us.
probably spent an awful lot of blood, sweat, and tears making those updates. But if that
That's why I'm
changes,
here.
the person who is being incentivized and
Which is all us,
compensated
we're all
will
one
be
people.
doing that work.
Or one or two.
That's me.
Yeah.
So-
Right.
Yeah.
So you
Right.
hate to do it all over, it's the
So-
first time you weren't.
Yeah, great point, Christopher. So
Yeah.
that's all gonna be work that's supported in the professional development, so hence like the workshops that are gonna have that kind of hands-on part. The idea being that you will be in an environment where you're supported and will be doing that work. And then again, the reason for the stipend work is because this is such a tight timeline and there's so much work that we're asking people to do at once. Writing outcomes, mapping, right, in a semester, it's a heavy lift, right? I think we're really honest about that. At the forefront, it is, it's a lot of work, and so that's where those stipend positions came in.
Okay,
Mhm.
awesome, thanks.
So during these hands-on workshops, will we be actually working in TK20 with help?
So I will not tie that work to TK20, right? So the work will be done in the workshop, right? So the way that we are constructing these workshops is you will be writing outcomes, getting feedback, right? Being able to ask questions, getting support around the mapping. I will not promise, right? And I don't think I'm even gonna pursue the path that the work will be done in TK20. The work needs to be accomplished. This has kind of been my messaging around the technology the entire time. At April 2020, the work needs to be done, right? And so how it's captured, how it's documented, we are kind of figuring that out right as we go, because first the work needs to be done, then we need to think through and identify ways that it's going to be captured in the way that's going to be the best of our, to the best uses of everyone. So we will kind of deal with documenting it, right? But first the work needs to be accomplished, and that's our focus.
So are you saying we might be ditching TK20?
I think everything is under assessment, right? So like we are assessing all of our processes, all of our procedures, and if TK20 is the tool that is going to help us do that, then we will continue to pursue that. I think also because so much is in flux right now, right? Like we're changing, we're doing a lot of different things to make the research department, is Korean in here? Yeah. To make the research department, right, like be keeping up with that as we're making these changes would just be a nightmare, I feel like. So having our systems in place, having our, documentation in place, understanding all of us, right, what we need from that tool, and then figuring that out with the research department, I think is the best approach for us.
Yeah, I just want to say as well, like the idea is that we want to build a process that meets the needs of the people utilizing that process, and then we'll figure out how the technology can support that or doesn't support that and adjust what we're doing accordingly, rather than trying to build whatever we're doing to fit the technology, right? It should be the other way around. So that's the way we're approaching it.
Nice.
So we're not ditching it, it's more like we're gradually growing apart.
Okay.
Now, have we determined?
We'll define that relationship later.
How many programs have to be assessed?
All of them.
And what is that all of them?
So all of the academic
What's the number?
programs. Korean, do we have an exact number?
Everything in the catalog.
It's 100, including academic,
If it's in a catalog.
including ICCD program
Yes,
study
yes.
and concentration, it is 147.
140.
Now, I will be responsible for one,
Mhm.
okay? So I would assume that we won't have 147 people. I mean, will one person be assigned to each program? Or
So-
some people will probably have multiple
Yep.
programs.
So in the documentation, we made it, we've talked about this, that we're leaving it up to the chairs and coordinators of the department and the deans. So that's going to
However it
be,
gets there, all of them are going to be.
all of them are going to have outcomes, and all of them are going to be assessed per HLC's incredibly explicit outcomes that we need by our focus visit. So that work will be done. Currently, the current stage that we're in, the call for stipend proposals went out, and right now the stage that we're in is that the chairs and coordinators are working with the deans to decide the type of work. Like, I don't know all the programs, I don't pretend to know all the work, right, at that level, and so that's gonna be with chairs, coordinators, and deans to determine that.
We do think that there are going to be some areas that have multiple programs, but that those programs share a lot of outcomes. And so if that's the case, then one individual may be able to tackle multiple programs because the outcomes, maybe the programs are stackable, or they share a lot of coursework.
Yeah.
I mean, then they're going to have overlapping outcomes, and it's not going to be as much work as if it was like you had 2 or 3 completely separate or, completely different types of programs.
So that was the design, is that the chairs and coordinators would determine that. Yeah.
So, I think this is where the part of the confusion is always there.
Sure.
For example, in my department I have, or you could say I have 8 different programs. Well, truly there's only 2. There are AAS, because the rest is part of the AS. There's no such thing as an AS in geology. Now, we call it an area of concentration.
Mm-hmm.
2 courses in geology doesn't make it an area of concentration. But if somebody wants an associate in science, they can take geology courses to meet the requirements for their AS. So the way I see it is things, everything in there still leads to the AS. A lot of the program outcomes are going to be shared regardless of the discipline. And there will be a few that are going to be very specific to biological sciences, some that are very specific for astronomy,
Right.
but a whole bunch of them are really going to be the same as the AS program. So
Sure.
that's how I see it.
Sure.
Now, somebody asked how many people are going to be, will be a luxury to have one person per program. We won't, and now we have to be realistic. Even in my department, I'm having a hard time recruiting people for different reasons, right? And I'm not an expert in physics. So biological science, I can do that one. But geology, I'm not an expert there. So I think if somebody here has already volunteered, is going to take that on in your own department, you still have to convince people to help you with a lot of the stuff that you don't know. I'm going to be the brunt. I'm going to do the brunt of the work for biological science, but since my area is not anatomy and physiology either, they'll have to feed me some of this stuff. Because the alternative is that I'm just going to make it up. I don't think that's going to be a good assessment, right? I don't want to make up any. So.
Right, and so, you know, the conversations that we're going to be engaging with around this work are like, you know, what are the purposes of this, right? Like, what are the values, what's the value of having these outcomes, right? So we are saying that as a result of this course of study, students will be able to do these things, right? And so some of our programs in the catalog share that immediately with, if you look through our catalog, programs say, like, these are the outcomes of this program. If you engage in this course of study, you will be able to do these things. Some don't, right? But we have to believe in the value of, you know, saying to ourselves and for students, this is what you will be able to do or learn as a result of engaging in this course of study. And then, you know, the purpose of assessment, right, is to say, like, how are we doing with that, right? Like, how are we doing in ensuring that students are meeting these outcomes? Yeah, Victor.
Yeah, so I'm the only full-time sociologist in the department, in our behavioral science department, of psychology, anthropology, philosophy. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that it's in terms of the program assessment plan developer, that we should not have one person for each discipline, that one person should be able to do all 4 disciplines then?
No, so I think we're talking about different, and this is exactly why, right? So the difference in departments is in areas is exactly the reason why we left it up to the department in areas. So I think what we've, you know, this has been something that's been raised in multiple venues is your department. And I think when you have these various disciplines, you would have content area experts developing those.
Right, because I would feel very uncomfortable. I
Yeah.
couldn't actually assess psychology or anthropology or philosophy, but not sociology.
Right, right. So having content area experts, right, that is the work of faculty, right? These content area experts creating out, this is part of the curriculum process. This is why it's deeply rooted in, you know, faculty work. And it's rooted in the curriculum, and it's saying as a result of these course of study, these are the outcomes, and I think it should be, yeah, the content area experts who are coming up with that. Absolutely. Yeah?
2 very practical questions.
Sure.
The first one is, should we wait till the general education outcomes are established before we do the program outcomes? And my question sort of piggybacks on the question that was asked before. And the second one is, if we do investigate 20, are we doing this on a Word document, or are you going to pass around an Excel spreadsheet, or how are we going to map?
Yeah, so to your first question, I think that these things are happening alongside each other, right? The work is happening concurrently, and as we're doing the program outcomes, we're going to be talking about revising our gen ed outcomes. I envision, based on this is not my personal opinion, but based on the conversations that we started at assessment day in the spring, we had, you know, a mixed group, employee group there having these conversations, and I think that our conversations that started around gen ed revisions are really going to lead to not something drastically different, right? So as they're happening concurrently, I think if we end the semester with our program outcomes and then our new gen ed revisions, right? And then we can start the mapping process of tying all of those together, the programs with the gen ed outcomes in the spring. I think that work will dovetail nicely into next semester. So that's kind of how I envision that that process and based off of the conversations that have already taken place, I think we will head nicely in that direction. So they're happening concurrently, and that's just the workflow of accomplishing what we need to do. To speak to your second question logistically, I've seen maps and documentation in Word and Excel files. I've seen documentation from a variety of different institutions. And so I've been speaking with the external consultant who's going to come to campus, and he works with his institution and has shared documentation with other community colleges. That's Excel, Word files. And so I think, again, just a place to capture the work needs to be done and a place to capture the work. And then once we see kind of people's needs and how we need to share this and document this, I think then we can start figuring out in TK20, if we have the capability in there to build out what we need to do to capture what we need to capture. Does that?
So each program I could do it on a word processor.
I will promise you it will be a standard form.
Okay.
Yes, it's not going to be just turn in a Word document. Whatever the file format, it will be a standard,
Yeah, some of our standard curriculum documents are going to be affected by this.
So it'll be some kind of standard which will be rolled out right in the training. That's the idea of it being hands-on. We'll provide the forms, we'll walk you through the process. You'll know exactly what you need to do and what you need to turn in to complete this work. Yeah. Eugene?
How detailed, how many outcomes, how detailed, how granular?
This is all work we're going to dive into, right? So we have the 2 internal trainings that we're going to be talking about. What's a goal, what's an objective, what's an outcome. We're going to get into the measure, like how to measure these things, right? How kind of the almost like a rubric of what is a good outcome, right? We're going to dive into all this work. So that is going to be all these questions are going to be answered in that course of professional development, and that's the work that we're going to be diving into. Yeah. So we've talked about this a little bit, right? So I'm just going to briefly go over this. For all academic programs, again, holistically, everything that we're calling a program, everything that's in the catalog is a program, we must articulate measurable program learning outcomes. These are the stipulations from HLC for our focus visit. We're going to need to map course level outcomes to program level outcomes, and then to our gen ed outcomes. Another really important piece is developing an assessment schedule that demonstrates that these learning outcomes are systematically assessed. So that kind of, once the outcomes are in place, we're going to get the mapping, right? So course, program, and gen ed outcomes, they're all mapped systematically. And then the final piece is really going to be of kind of these processes and procedures, is going to be a schedule or a calendar to ensure that all of these outcomes are being assessed in a systematic way in a certain time frame. So that's another important piece that we're going to be developing as well. And so these are really opportunities, and see these as opportunities to update and revise, right, these outcomes or the curriculum, and then to really evaluate, potentially you will be looking at that and you need to evaluate some of those different curricular paths and kind of have conversations within your department. So hopefully this work is going to really spark conversation within your department with your colleagues about the different outcomes, right, at the course program level, and it will really spark conversations and provide an opportunity to really update the curriculum as well. So this first internal training, we're going to have 2 internal trainings before our external consultant comes on campus. The first one's going to be Monday, September 24th, 2 p.m. This is open, an open training. And the topic for this one is going to be right here in the CTE, understanding the difference between program outcomes, program objectives, program goals, and just kind of all wrapping our heads around the work that needs to be done, and then setting us up for that second training. And then these 2 internal trainings are really designed to make sure that we are all ready to hit the ground running when the external consultant comes on campus, because the focus of those workshops are going to be work, right, getting the work done.
Are those going to be available as a video?
Yes, so we will be recording these via Collaborate, and there will be recordings available. So if you are someone who is interested in that stipend, the stipend position, these, you know, we will work to accommodate schedules, right? So these first 2 internal trainings will be recorded via Collaborate. So we highly encourage in-person participation if at all possible. But we know with schedules that we need to be flexible, and so they will be recorded, and viewing the training will also count as participation. So I know we got to a large number of questions during the presentation, but do we have any lingering questions? Kind of open the floor for dialogue, discussion. Of course, as soon as the question slides up there.
Well, just as a thought, some of the programs at the college essentially have a reliable number of completions. I'm thinking of the career training, career education programs. You know, folks want to take a specialized training, get a gig, and you know, unless they wash out, we're pretty sure that they're going to roll on the inside. So for those kinds of programs, I think you know, that's an interesting and probably useful metric. I think, is Michael Flaherty here? He would defy me to name one English graduate in the last 20 years. So for programs like that, obviously, we need to think a little differently. No, I don't have suggestions, just an observation.
Well,
I guess it's not really a question.
Well, I mean, it's a great point to bring up, and I think that's where we can have some of this ongoing dialogue and some of these deeper conversations. Like, how do you do that kind of assessment, right? So maybe in with a program with a large number of completers, there's a capstone project or some kind of final test, right? An exam, certification exam, right? Where those things can be measured. But what does it look like, right? And I think that's, you know, these conversations are important to have, but I also don't think they're new, right? So these are conversations that community colleges are having across the nation, right? So what does it look like for these departments that we may not have a high number of graduates, but what does it look like to do some kind of assessment or some kind of capstone in a course that students typically take in their 3rd or 4th semester, kind of looking at patterns of student behavior, what does that look like? And so I think having some of these deeper conversations around where are you going to be able to capture the data that's going to be the most meaningful and useful to you, and how do we have those conversations and support you in doing that work. I think there's valuable information, valuable data about student learning that can be gained there, and so how do we support you in finding that information and finding the data that's going to be the most helpful in improving your teaching and learning. So no, great point, and I think these are conversations we're going to continue to have. John?
Lauren, we've decided to allow the deans of each of the major departments to decide. I mean, let me start this way. We can anticipate, I suspect, that there may be some programs where someone is not willing to assess internally. So is it my understanding that the dean would be responsible for figuring out how those programs will be assessed?
So you're not talking about the current stipend structure, but you're saying in the future assessing.
Well, I mean, we want to have each program, which is 140 something, we want to ensure that each program is assessed. So somebody has to assess it. Obviously, some people assess more than one. Some of us will only assess one. Do we anticipate that there may not be full participation or enough participation that all the programs are assessed? And if not, is it the dean that decides how that is going to be addressed?
Yeah, Kevin.
The names will be coming back to me by noon tomorrow. So in arts and sciences, by then I get a sense of what is not being covered.
Yeah.
But one thing I guarantee you is that I will not make top-down decision. I'll work with the chair to identify folks the best we can, to cover as many as we can, but I would not be mandating anyone to do assessment.
Okay, so what's the strategy?
The strategy, continue to work with the chair to identify what is missing, and then continue to identify folks the best we can.
Okay.
If full-time faculty cannot, may not be interested, then we will move on to revisit adjunct faculty participation.
Okay, so we're going to focus on full-time, and if there's any slack, we'll approach the adjunct faculty.
In fact, full-time, part-time faculty are also welcome.
Yeah,
the first
absolutely.
round to send me the
Absolutely.
names too.
Right.
Some departments are sending adjunct names to me as it is.
Okay. do we anticipate having holes where we can't find somebody, either adjunct or full-time, that will assess programs?
I think.
That's too early to tell, I don't know.
Yeah, I think.
I think tomorrow, when I look at the list, I will have a much better sense, but right now I cannot tell.
Yeah, and I think also that, I mean, right, I would agree with that. It's too early to tell right now.
Well, that may be true, however, as a leader, we need to anticipate these possibilities, and we have to have a strategy for ensuring. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean it falls on the dean's shoulders then? We can't find people who will assess these programs?
I will say that
And ultimately, the rubber meets the road, the buck stops in the dean's office?
Sure, I would say, like, personally, I'm gonna take responsibility in that in terms of having those conversations. I think that's something important that in my role as chair of the assessment committee to have those conversations. And I think with conversations I've already had with faculty, a lot of the conversations have been not necessarily don't want to do assessment, but it maybe hasn't been valuable to them. And so I think the conversations around, why hasn't it necessarily been valuable in the past, and how can we have a conversation and work with that individual to see the value in the work of assessment. And to be honest, I think individual conversations from my experience and my brief time in this role have been really productive.
Well,
and
that's a laudable democratic process. But at some point in time, some hard decisions may have to be made to ensure that all programs are assessed.
And I think it's, that's going to be, we're going to be continuously engaging in this dialogue as we move forward. And I think, like Kevin said, when I said, I mean, it's too early to tell right now. And so we're going to continue to engage in these conversations. I'm definitely going to, take on some of that role as the assessment committee chair. And I'll be asking my committee to do the same in terms of engaging with faculty and having those conversations. Yeah.
How will you be persuading adjuncts to take this work on?
And what do you mean by this work?
Assessment, the assessment work, if full-time faculty possibly, potentially are not that willing to assess programs, how are you going to persuade adjunct faculty to do that?
So the current structure that we're putting forth, right, the program outcome developer is a stipend position, right? So we anticipate, right, participation in that because there's a $1,500 stipend because of the short time frame and the amount of work that needs to get done. We've offered that stipend because this is a heavy lift this semester, moving into semester. Yeah, well, not necessarily, right? So depending on the area, right, like Victor's brought up that point, I think pretty succinctly, that it's not necessarily just one person within the department. And moving forward, for kind of our plan for the following year in terms of implementing this assessment, the model that we are moving forward with is this idea of an assessment liaison. And this is a model that has worked at some of our peer institutions. So other of our peer institutions who had similar focus visits had to really rework how they were doing assessment. This is the model they put in place. And some of our institutions, peer institutions, are now receiving awards for excellence in assessment because of these kinds of models they put in place. So that's the idea moving forward, is these assessment liaisons. There's great work already being done on our campus with this kind of model. And so the idea being that there would be someone coordinating assessment efforts and eliciting participation in assessment efforts from the larger department faculty, so both full-time faculty and adjunct faculty. And when HLC was here on campus, they were interested in that, right? How are adjunct faculty being engaged in the assessment process? They brought up dual credit faculty, right? How are we engaging if we're saying these courses are being taught either in our high schools or here on campus? How are we engaging those faculty? So this is a model that will hopefully help us do that. One person taking on kind of that leadership role and eliciting eliciting help and collaboration from their colleagues within their department. So I would say the answer to your question is having kind of someone in that leadership role, and then having some the colleagues within the department have those conversations and collaborate in those assessment efforts.
Hi, just one quick question. Will program assessment developers be required to attend the September 24th meeting and also the October 4th meeting, or is there a choice? You have to attend both, or just one?
So there are 4 meetings that are scheduled. So it's the 2 internal trainings and then the 2 workshops with the external consultant. So we are saying participation in all 4 of those. The first 2 internal, we will be recording via Collaborate, so we definitely understand being flexible with schedules. The 2 workshops, we are really looking for, because it's gonna be that hands-on work, we're really looking for in-person participation. But again, we'll have those conversations and we will, we understand scheduling. But we are really looking, because like I said, we've been talking about that's where the work's gonna take place. You're gonna have support in that environment, and so we're really encouraging in-person attendance at those.
Can you give us the other 3 dates?
I have them right here, you want me to say them all?
Yeah.
I know we're gonna have one scheduling change, so I'll correct you when that one comes up.
Well, training session 1 is 9:24
At 2 p.m.
2 p.m. Training session 2 is 10:04 at 2:30. And that is the same day as curriculum, so we'll be watching on video.
Absolutely, recording and watching later.
Workshop 1 is on 10:19, is that the one that's changing?
No,
Okay, and then workshop,
What
excuse
time?
me, workshop
all
1
day.
is 10:19, and that's from 8:30 to 12:30.
And then with consulting hours in the afternoon. So it's
And that's 1 to 5.
but the afternoon's a little bit more flexible,
That's a
yeah.
Friday, right?
Friday, correct.
10:19.
And then it'll be 11-2 is the second one. We had to move it a Friday forward. 11-2, we had to move it to
That's also
accommodate.
Friday.
Also a Friday,
8:30 to noon 30?
and then with consulting hours in the afternoon.
It was 11:09,
Oh,
it's changing to
a week
11:02.
earlier.
It's changed to 11-2, it's a week early, we're gonna push that out. Yeah, and
It's the
those were
same
both
day as
Fridays.
the DDR conference.
We will talk, Julian, we will chat.
Oh, yeah, the DVR.
Yeah.
I did want to make another observation or
Sure.
comment, I should say.
Please.
For those of you that could benefit from a visual, some of the programs already have the outcomes in the catalog. And I'm just looking at page 103, it says accounting. And so they have 7 outcomes already listed here. If you need to look at an example, that would be.
Those are program outcomes?
Yeah, that would be a good example to look at, because some people have already done this. Like, I did mine, but they're not in the catalog because it wasn't on the curriculum proposal page. So I had to put mine in that. But this is a good example if you are someone who wants to look at it visually to see what you have to do, and then those will be assessed. So it's page 103, it's accounting.
Could someone pick ones that are good examples and say, look at.
We will be doing all of that, yeah, so that, all of that information, I love the enthusiasm, but yes, that's what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be talking about models, we're talking about how to create them, we're gonna talk about how to assess them, that's all coming this semester.
Okay, and
Mhm.
is the normal assessment for this year happening at the same time?
So the current assessment cycle, that the reports were just due September 15th, like is currently happening, right? So again, all of our processes, procedures, everything are up for assessment. And so we're gonna be looking at the assessment cycle and seeing if it's going to fit our
So that
needs.
November 15th deadline's not there right now?
So the November 15th deadline for, we will be we can't stop assessing, right?
Right.
So we're gonna see where we're at, right? We're gonna look at that November 15th. What I think what we're gonna do is focus on course level, is ask, we can't stop, right, assessment. So what I think we're gonna be doing, and I'm gonna talk to my committee about this on Thursday, is focusing on course level assessment for those reports. And then the implementation reports that are coming. So that's what I think we're gonna do is focus. We can't stop. So we're gonna be focusing, I think, on course level assessment as this program and gen ed outcomes assessment is being adapted and modified. So everything's happening on top of it.
Like a scrum.
It is like a scrum, you're right. That's exactly what it's like. Yeah. I'm learning a lot of project management skills. Any other questions? Thank you all for coming. I'm very excited about the enthusiasm in the room, the questions, the engagement. I will continue to say, right, in this process, whether you're skeptical, right, whether you are fully drank the Kool-Aid, you're on board, right, wherever you are in that process, faculty engagement is essential, right? So this is rooted in the curriculum, it's deeply tied to teaching and learning. This is our work in the institution, and so I appreciate that level of engagement. And we are trying as best as possible, right, as we go through this to communicate. If you're frustrated by that process, like you're not getting the level of communication that you would like, please reach out to me. And we're exploring different methods and ways. This is one of them to continually to update you on the process. But if you have any feedback for me in that point where you're not getting the level of updates that you want or things are still unclear, please reach out to me. I'm also always available for department meetings or one-on-one meetings. So I think for this work to really move forward, it's going to be a lot of dialogue and conversation and engagement in these levels of forum. So I appreciate you guys being here very, very much. And until our next forum, if you have any questions or any comments about the process, please reach out to me. I really value your feedback, and I really am excited about partnering with you guys doing this work moving forward. So thank you. Yes.